Let's get started. In this video, we're going to cover the entire contents of Sunrise on the Reaping. This book is the magnum opus of this entire series. It is incredible. This book serves as proof that what brought down fascism, totalitarianism, was not necessarily the star-crossed lovers from District 12 or their rebellious and brave acts, but the life-threatening work and hope of the generation that came before, since Lucy Gray Baird. Sunrise on the Reaping proves that Katniss and Peeta's story is merely an echo of the one that came before. And I believe it's meant to aid us, a relatively downtrodden generation, right, that was thoroughly fucked by the generation that came before. I think it's maybe supposed to serve as a reminder, to remind us that the cycle of hope, resignation, pain, suffering, hope, belief, resignation, pain is not for naught. This book is about feeling resigned to one's fate and beating the odds anyway, even when you'd prefer not to. Some people believe it's Suzanne Collins' response to the baby dadification of President Snow. She said, "I'm here to fucking say something." I would like to start by defining propaganda. Mother Earth has spoken. Okay. Propaganda is defined as a systemic dissemination of information, particularly of the false or misleading sort, or in a false or misleading way. I also want to make a clear distinction between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is unintentionally inaccurate. Disinformation is when the person who is propagating that information or disseminating that information is very aware that what they are disseminating is false. Let's get into District and Capital Life in 50 ADD. This is where we open. District 12, Haymitch tells us, is plastered with posters, signage that say, "No peace, no bread. No peace, no security." And of course, no peacekeepers, no peace. No capital, no peace. These signs effectively translate to, if you resist, you will be starved. If you resist, you will be killed. If you resist, your children will be killed. And what might you be resisting? Anything that a peacekeeper tells you to do. I want you to think about the implications of that. There's also an enormous poster of one President Coriolanus Snow, and that poster reads, "Panem's #1 peacekeeper." Never effective as a peacekeeper. He literally does nothing as a peacekeeper. He literally does nothing as a peacekeeper. Now that we've set the scene, let's dive into the plot. Haymitch wakes up on the morning of his 16th birthday. He tells us his birthday is Reaping Day, July 4th. That's a very tough birthday, for obvious reasons. He tells us that the pair of shorts or underwear that he pulls on are a repurposed flour sack that read "Courtesy of the Capitol" on his ass. The first person that we get to meet in Haymitch's life is his ma. Haymitch says that she was widowed young when his father, his pa, died in a mining fire. She has raised Haymitch and his younger brother Sid by taking in laundry and making every penny count. He says she's 35 years old, which means she was 19 when Haymitch was born. She asks him to fill the cistern. This is a dirty and time-consuming job, and he begs for the morning off to go work his job at Hattie's and to see his girlfriend, Lenore Dove. She's made him cornbread for breakfast, and he has a little bit of jam with it, and it's a special occasion, and she lets him off the hook. He doesn't have to fill the cistern this morning. He'll fill it in the afternoon. Haymitch goes from his house to Hattie's, where he effectively works for her as a mule. He helps her brew white liquor. She gives him a few gifts because it's his birthday. One of them is a bottle of white liquor, and she says, "If you're old enough to brew it, I figure you're old enough to drink it." And Haymitch says, "Hey, I am not going to drink it," right? He tells us that he has no interest in liquor whatsoever, which is just one of the ways that Miss Collins kind of like pokes a bruise. It starts so warm. It's the warmest insight into District 12 that we've ever had. And we, as the reader, are very aware that Haymitch is going to end up extremely isolated, very alone, ultimately with no one and nothing. So it's a pretty tragic way to open the book. Most of this book will be tragic. Hattie also gives Haymitch, on top of the bottle of white liquor, some extra corn kernels for Lenore Dove's geese. Lenore Dove is Haymitch's girlfriend and his true love. The way that he talks about Lenore Dove is the way that we all want to be talked about by any partner, spouse, person that adores us. He admires her, he respects her, he is in awe of her, he thinks she's beautiful, but that really doesn't come up nearly as much as the respect that he has for her. Haymitch tells us that him and Lenore Dove actually met in the woods. Burdock Everdeen, goes by Birdie, which is like, come on, Suzanne, let the rest of us catch up. Who goes by Birdie is actually the reason that Lenore Dove and Haymitch meet. It's noted that Burdock calls Lenore Dove "cuz." short for cousin. Listen, I have analyzed every single book of this text and all the other texts. There is not enough evidence to prove exactly what the link between Lucy Gray and one Katniss Everdeen might be. Maybe one day there will be. Lenore Dove's mom is Maud Ivory, and we learn that she died in childbirth. We know that Maud Ivory was the cousin of Lucy Gray. Maud Ivory, Lucy Gray, and one Lenore Dove are all Bairds. Lenore Dove Baird. Something else I just want to mention about Burdock is he's been obsessed with Astrid March since he was a child, and Katniss's mom has been known as the most beautiful girl in town. She uses her privilege to aid the sick, often supplying them with herbs and medicines and actually practicing healing for free. Her family owns the apothecary, and that's how Astrid acquired her medical know-how. Burdock is kind of teased for the way that he feels about Astrid because Haymitch says town girls don't marry scene boys unless something has gone completely haywire. And we know that it does. If you have not engaged with this universe at all, you should stop this video right now. This book is only as impactful as it is because we have so much history on both sides of it. This book is filling so many gaps, and that's why it's so powerful. I would recommend reading all of the books. These are phenomenal books. So let's talk about Lenore Dove. Haymitch tells us she's named for a dead girl, and that's got two implications. One, we know that the Covey named their babies for poems and colors, and Lenore Dove's name is based off of Edgar Allan Poe's poem. The Raven is a poem about overwhelming grief. It's about succumbing to tragedy. It's associated with death and darkness. Something else that I may be wondering if Miss Collins was incorporating was the book The Lonesome Dove, which are also the same initials, Lenore Dove. This book is known for its lack of happy endings and the disappointments that the characters are left with at the end. It's regarded as courageous because the ending is tragic and parallels more to real life. So I'm wondering if she's doing that too. And of course, Lucy Gray, Lenore Dove. Dove is a shade of gray. So Haymitch tells us that Lenore Dove has been raised by her two uncles, Tan Amber and Clark Carmine. We learn that Clark Carmine is gay and has been in a 30-year relationship with someone else in town, but they can't be out about it because that will provoke harassment from peacekeepers and might even lead to systemic job loss. So it's a homophobic time in Panem and specifically in District 12. Haymitch does tell us that he's very cool with any kind of love, so we know he's an ally, and that's awesome. We probably knew that anyway. Haymitch tells us that her uncles don't necessarily approve of this relationship. It's not particularly personal to Haymitch. It's that Haymitch and the Abernathys are known for associating with rebels. It's actually speculated that maybe Haymitch's father's mining accident wasn't an accident. Maybe it was a rebel plot. Speculative. One of the hallmarks of District 12 is that they are often in gray, but Lenore Dove is often wearing scraps of some sort of colorful fabric in her hair, and we come to find out that these scraps of fabric may in fact be from Lucy Gray's dress that she competed and won the Hunger Games in, which is phenomenal. Lenore Dove and Haymitch don't talk about Lucy Gray. In fact, Haymitch tells us that he tried to prompt her into conversation about District 12's one winner, but it was maybe too painful to talk about. She shut down and she didn't want to go there. And that's not like Lenore Dove to shut down and not want to go there. Lenore Dove has been arrested twice before the age of 12 for being a rebel, for singing rebellious songs or writing rebellious lyrics, and there's a few other traitorous things that have happened in District 12 that she's suspected of, but it's never necessarily been proven. We'll get to some of those later. The reason that she was able to get off, or that she's not rotting in jail or was not executed, was because she's 12 years old at the time, but her uncles are nervous about her associating with a person who's from a family of known rebels and someone whose job is bootlegging. Haymitch gets it. And what Haymitch really cares about is that they clearly want to protect her, and he wants to protect her too. So he takes no personal offense. Haymitch is wonderful. It's Haymitch's birthday, and so she gives him a flint striker, and it is gorgeous. It has a snake and a songbird on it. Yeah. And she says, those two are survivors. Don't we know it? And it's actually been crafted by Tan Amber. Tan Amber has done a lot of crafting and has made a lot of impact in District 12. He actually is responsible and credited with crafting Burdock Everdeen's arrow tips, which we know will later be Katniss Everdeen's arrow tips. Tan Amber is really fuels the revolution. It's just an extra way that Collins shows us that things that maybe seem small are not. They echo. Ripples. So Haymitch is able to spend the morning with the love of his life, Lenore Dove, and then he has to go into town and they both have to prepare for the reaping. While he's preparing for the reaping, he gives us a little bit of information. One of the things that he thinks about is Sid. Sid is 10 years old and literally heart-achingly adorable. One of the only things that we really get to learn about Sid is that he loves the sky and he loves the outdoors. And so Haymitch is always leaning on Sid to do his homework to make sure that he can get a job above ground and doesn't have to be doomed to a life in the mines. He knows that in a few years, Sid is going to have to enter the reaping himself, and he's trying to think of ways that he's going to talk to Sid about what to do if he is reaped. He says, how will I prepare him should he be reaped? What I'll tell him is, and always remember, whatever happens, his family will love him and be proud of him no matter what. It's heartbreaking that Haymitch says this right now because we know that he believes it, right? There's not a single thing that Sid could do in the Hunger Games or outside of it that would result in Haymitch not loving him. But Haymitch spends the rest of this book feeling like a failure and believing that what he's doing is disgracing his family. And so the compassion that he can have for other people, namely his little brother, he does not have for himself. The second thing we learn while Haymitch is walking into town and getting prepared for the reaping, the capital pays their coal miners in what's called scrip. This is actually a real world example. This did happen in Appalachia specifically. But it was apparently normal. Scrip is what you would be paid in lieu of legitimate currency or legitimate money. You can only spend scrip at the Capitol store where there's pretty shitty products. Actually, the Covey or Lenore Dove have written a song called The Capitol Store, and it's since been made illegal to sing. There's a few places in town that do accept scrip. His mom accepts scrips as payment, but not everybody does. Haymitch, after trading the white liquor, is able to purchase candy for Lenore Dove at the candy store. The candy store is owned by the Donners. More on that in a second, but he does get her a bag of candy that he's going to give her, and he has it in his pocket. Let's talk about the reaping. Haymitch has 20 slips of paper in the reaping bowl, and the reason he has 20 slips is because he takes out 3 tesserae every year, one for each member of his family. Him, Ma, and Sid. What tesserae gets you is 1 can of tinned oil and 1 sack of flour once a month. He does this to feed himself and his family and make sure they can survive. He's definitely not the only child in District 12 that has to make this sacrifice, but it's the reason that he has 20 slips in the bowl. Something else creating a lot of anxiety in the space of the reaping this year is that there will be double the tributes. This is the 50th Quarter Quell. Yay, double the horror. So double the tributes means double the chances of being reaped. And Haymitch is working really hard not to have hope because he understands that it's very likely that he will be reaped. Something else that gets more thoroughly explained in Sunrise on the Reaping is why the children have to dress up for the reaping. So if you don't dress up for the reaping to show respect for the Capitol and their production, your parents can be harassed or even arrested. They'll definitely be beat up. And again, we're talking about Haymitch's underwear is made of a flour sack. Have you felt a flour sack? It's not fucking comfortable, okay? It's not soft. This is not jersey cotton. So Haymitch is wearing the pants that his father got married in and a shirt that his mother has stitched together using handkerchiefs from the Capitol store. So his shirt is made out of handkerchiefs. She has to go through these efforts to make him a sort of dress shirt to present himself for imprisonment and murder in front of the Capitol. I definitely don't think it's an accident that his shirt is made of handkerchiefs, particularly because the main reason that Snow got caught, if you'll recall, in the 10th Hunger Games for cheating is because he dropped his handkerchief into a vat of rainbow snakes. I think that this is Suzanne's way of calling us back. She's telling us that Haymitch is literally dressed in imprints of the past that have been stitched together. Imprints of what effectively saved Lucy Gray's life. So Haymitch arrives at the reaping and he's standing next to Burdock and Blair, his 2 close friends, and Otho Malark, who is described as a big lug of a guy. So the mayor comes out, as the mayor always does, and he's saying that the mayor is trying for a neutral tone, but her voice leaks disapproval. And this essentially guarantees that she's going to be replaced soon because all the good mayors are. This has a lot of implications in it because we will come to know Mage Undersea, the daughter of the mayor. Mayor Undersea has been mayor for a very long time before we arrive at the 74th Hunger Games. So this implies that Mayor Undersea is a shitty mayor. This is when we get a lot of character introductions. So here we go. Drusilla, sounds a lot like Cruella, who is District 12's manager, so to speak. She's our Effie Trinket predecessor, is perhaps the most unlikable person in this entire series, which says quite a bit. And she's regarded among the children of District 12 as the face of evil. She's had a lot of face work done, and she's in an outfit that is like faux military. She is enormously and impossibly self-absorbed. Most of the people from the Capitol are. She refers to the tributes as district piglets. She is a horrible person. I could not overstate how horrible this person is. She says, ladies first. The first District 12 tribute reaped is one Luella McCoy. Haymitch tells us that you've never known a smarter, spunkier 13-year-old girl. Haymitch tells us that he's known Luella since she was born. When she was 5 and he was 8, she became obsessed with him and started following Haymitch around and referred to him as her sweetheart, would tell anyone who'd listen. She is ultimately Haymitch's family. The next girl reaped from the pool of District 12 kids is one Maisie Donner. She is known as the meanest girl in town. Maisie Donner has a twin, Marilee Donner, and has a best friend, Astrid. The three of them are a little group. Maisley's close relationship with Astrid should give Haymitch some context for who she actually is, maybe despite appearances or his personal experience with her, because we know Astrid March to be a very kind-hearted person, a very self-aware person, and a very compassionate person. But that is not Haymitch's experience with Maisie. Before we get into that, the people of District 12, there's kind of gas, there's a lot of shock to go around because tributes are not usually selected from town kids. Maybe this is because the reapings are rigged. Maybe it's because town kids don't have to take out tesserae because they have enough to eat, or the assumption is that they have enough to eat. One of the most important parts of Maisley's character is that she's often wearing a lot of jewelry, and the Seam kids associate this with a flaunting of wealth and kind of like a braggadocio. We'll come to find out that it's something else. She is always dressed as a pair with her sister, and their twinship is very much on display. Haymitch recalls a story of them both receiving like bright pink bikes for their birthday. 2 bikes, which is seriously unheard of. The Seam kids would love to share a bike between all of them. Maisley and her sister are destined to work behind the counter at the candy shop for the rest of their lives, which, as far as fates in District 12 go, is not the worst one. Now for the boys. Wyatt Callow is the first boy reaped for District 12. He's a child of the Booker boys, so a lot of District 12, not necessarily given time to recover from the shock of the Maisley situation, recognize this as karmic retribution. Booker boys are people that will bet on anything and everything, including the Hunger Games. So they're often calculating the odds of the kids that have been reaped and are actively participating in the Hunger Games, and that makes them social pariahs, understandably. It's a pretty intense juxtaposition to what we as readers have had insight into, because we know that President Snow literally founded the odds and betting system, and it essentially made him a hero, right? It definitely contributed to him winning the Plinth Prize, right? And it's obviously something that has become a staple of the Hunger Games. It really, really illuminates the value systems of the district versus the capital. The fourth boy reaped in this year's Hunger Games is Woodbine Chance. We get a little thing, and I'm telling you, I've done the research. I have combed through this shit. It's impossible to prove. The link between Lucy Gray and Katniss Everdeen is still hidden, okay? But we get this line that there are rumors that Woodbine Chance is related to Lenore Dove on her pa's side, so they treat her really well. They have a soft spot for her. We can't connect those dots yet. They simply don't connect. But it is not yet possible with the material that we have. So Woodbine Chance is reaped, and Woodbine Chance is known as the fastest kid in the district. And he flees. Sure that he's walking toward his certain death, he runs. His family shouts encouragement at him. They're telling him to go, go, go. And he is shot down by peacekeepers for fleeing. It is illegal to flee in District 12. The peacekeepers keep firing, and they don't just hit Woodbine, who does get shot in the head. Also, there are some strays, collateral damage, that just goes unmentioned for the rest of the book. Woodbine's mother is clinging to the body of her son, and the peacekeepers are trying to remove the body while Drusilla is like shouting commands about how we gotta redo this reaping because obviously this can't be presented to the people of the capital and the citizens of Panem. She's clinging to the body of her son, she's sobbing, and the peacekeepers are trying to beat her off the still warm body of her dead son. Lenore Dove is an interventionist. She does not sit by. She's very politically active. She tries to protect Woodbine's mom, which what she's doing there is interfering with peacekeeping, and so peacekeepers go to beat her, and Haymitch is watching the love of his life about to be struck by a peacekeeper, and so Haymitch intervenes. This is how Haymitch enters the 50th Hunger Games. He is the replacement tribute, and he is selected because what he was doing was illegal, which again was just trying to protect Lenore Dove from taking a blow. So Haymitch is illegally reaped. So District 12 is forced to reshoot the whole thing. The tributes that are already up on stage are forced to move back into the reaping crowd and facilitate this again. I cannot imagine the trauma of this. The main theme in this book is implicit submission and resignation. So Maisie, Luella, and Wyatt are re-reaped, and Drusilla has to do like some wordplay to remember Haymitch Abernathy's name. She doesn't really pull his name from the bowl, but she pretends to. And Haymitch says he finds himself reaching for his friends around him, but they are not there anymore because the commotion has meant that he's essentially like had a circle cleared around him. And he walks up to the stage and he is taken. Drusilla is super pissed that they've had to reshoot the reaping, so she says no goodbye for these folks. None of these tributes have done anything wrong except technically Haymitch, but they are deprived goodbyes. That's when we meet Plutarch Heavensby. He's here. As Haymitch is being taken away, Sid shouts, "Please don't take him. We need him." Oh my god. Drusilla is completely resistant to these pleas. She does not recognize these people as human beings. She's shouting orders. Plutarch intervenes and says, actually, we want to film the goodbyes. We want some tearful goodbyes for the propos. This, much like Plutarch, is bittersweet. The people of District 12, particularly families that have been brave enough to have rebellious ideas and the children of those rebels, do not simper to capital games. In fact, Haymitch, he recalls him and his father visiting one of the Steam kids who did not have parents to visit her in a previous games when she was reaped, and he says, don't let them paint their poster with your blood. So they all know that they're not supposed to perform. They're not going to perform for Plutarch and his camera crew. They're not going to play into the propaganda. Interestingly, this is effectively the sentiment that PETA is trying to communicate on top of the tribute center to Katniss Everdeen. I don't want to be a piece in their games. The fact that it sounds so treasonous and unbelievable to her at that time indicates that this sentiment and this fight and this sort of last stand that the people of District 12 have at the current moment is not there in 24 years. The entire book, Haymitch is really uncertain of where he stands with Plutarch. I think he sort of nails it when he says this. Plutarch acts friendly, but his indulgences, my family's goodbye, his fancy sandwiches, are just a method to manage me, because happy playthings are easier to handle than raging ones. And that's true. God, so as soon as you start to feel a little bit of like, yay, Plutarch's here, he really just like sets that shit on fire. He has Haymitch's family performing their sorrow and insisting that they make it bigger and bigger and bigger. Haymitch understands the toll this is taking on his mother, particularly. To be willing to demonstrate this emotion on camera indicates just how desperate she is to hug her son goodbye. I mean, hello, obviously, but Plutarch makes them keep redoing it and redoing it and redoing it, which is just so fucking gross. It's actually hard to read. A lot of this book is hard to read, and it's written gorgeously, so that's saying quite a bit. Lenore Dove refuses to participate in Plutarch's bullshit, so Haymitch and Lenore don't get to say goodbye to each other. They don't get one last hug. And because Plutarch is insisting that they continue to perform and continue to perform, Drusilla actually gets fed up and says no hugs, and they don't get their last hug goodbye, despite the fact that they have, sacrificed their values to get that hug. Despite that Drusilla wouldn't let them hug, the train doesn't go anywhere for a damn hour. As it relates to the conditions of this year's Hunger Games, things have changed a lot since the 10th Hunger Games, when Lucy Gray and the rest of the tributes were transported in soiled animal carriages. Now they're on a train and everything is made of plastic. He says he's tossed into some compartment by himself with a single barred window. He smashes his fist into the glass until they bruise. As the train does pull away, he's looking out the window and he actually spots Lenore Dove on top of a hill, and she is wailing, and he feels so grateful for her to have denied Plutarch their final goodbye. He feels like this means that this moment belongs to them and not fucking Plutarch Heavensby. Haymitch is sitting there and he's thinking through his final words with his family members. He has no intention of winning the Hunger Games. None of the tributes from District 12 ever believe that they have any shot at winning the Hunger Games because they've only had one victor in 50 years, and she has been erased from the collective memory of Panem and District 12. So they understand that they are on their way to their slaughter. He's replaying his last moments with his family, and he's wondering why he told Sid he's the man of the house now, and he wishes he could take that back. Eventually, all the tributes are brought to one compartment of the train and they are fed. All the while, Drusilla is there and she's referring to Woodbine's execution as a revolt, that they managed to get the reaping despite the revolt. And Haymitch insists that he didn't attack anyone, and Drusilla says same thing. It doesn't matter what actually happened, you're not allowed to interfere with peacekeeping. Maisley's got a mouth on her, and we know that, right? Because she's been bullying the other children of District 12, but she turns it toward Drusilla. Yeah. If you're not a Maisley Maisley stan by the end of this video or by the end of this book. We don't understand each other. So Maisley says something to incite anger in Drusilla, and Drusilla slaps Maisley, and she doesn't miss a beat. She hits her right back. Haymitch speculates that Maisley's never been hit before, but the way that Maisley manages to take a beating really implies that maybe she has. Maisley doesn't tell us everything about her home life, or almost anything about her home life, but we do know that she doesn't have a lot of choice or say in her life, so I do think Maisley's been hit before. Because Maisley hits Drusilla back, Drusilla, who's wearing like a faux militarized outfit, has a riding crop on her hip and beats Maisley with the riding crop. Yeah. For the rest of this book, I want you to remember that Maisley is covered in welts. They are all over her body. We get more proof that being a victor in the games doesn't actually make you particularly victorious when Drusilla tells Maisley that she actually hopes she does win because her life's going to be a whole lot fucking worse than just dying in the Hunger Games. That's very scary, a terrifying prospect. And so when I'm saying that we might get more information, right, we are speculating as a fan base that maybe Miss Collins will give us Finnick's story. And we think we want that because we love him. But do we? Like, do we really want to read that? I mean, obviously we're going to read it. Maybe we don't want it as much as we think we do. Anyway, the whole time, Haymitch is very aware that Plutarch is stage managing Drusilla the same way he is the tributes. And he's often like paying her compliments. He's like, you're beautiful. You look really young. A bunch of surface level, shallow shit about her image and the illusion of who Drusilla is, which seems to be the only thing that the people of the capital have managed to hold on to, or the only thing that they actually care about. While they're asleep on the train, all the children are told to sleep in the same compartment, and Luella approaches Haymitch, and he asks her to be allies. He says, looking after her will give me a reason to keep going. Her looking after me will stave off the terror of facing death alone. I can only hope that we leave the world together. They don't. During this conversation, Luella confides that she doesn't want to team up with Maisley or Wyatt, but Wyatt particularly because his family are the Blue Book boys. She's like, he's despicable, this is disgusting. And she's noticed his token is a coin that is used for odds and betting or bluffing. So she's like, I don't want anything to do with these folks. So Haymitch says, no ish, you and me, we'll go it alone. The tributes arrive in the capital, and Haymitch notices that in the capital, there's similar signage that there is in District 12. He notes that the administration seems to be having to convince its own people to watch the Hunger Games as well. The tribute center this year is an abandoned gym. We learn that the gym has been abandoned to close to 40 years, which implies that this was the gym that Coriolanus Snow would have spent his days in the academy in, and it's the gym that Strabo Plinth, Sejanus' dad, would have replaced, but this one sat empty. It's just another example of the capital's excess. The tributes are told to strip, their clothes are immediately burned. The boys are taken to one locker room and the girls are taken to another locker room, and they are promptly sprayed with some sort of chemical concoction that we later find out is an insecticide. It's very painful and clearly very toxic, and it's also really sticky and gross, and there's not enough water to rinse the insecticide, so they all re-enter the gym like covered in this toxic gunk. Haymitch thinks about Maisley with her welts and how bad that must have hurt. Haymitch is introduced to his prep team. They are 2 university students. They don't seem to understand Haymitch as a person, and they're talking to him about his fur and his claws. He recognizes this as proof that they see him as an animal. The tributes are supposed to be dressed by their stylists and are carted off immediately to a photo shoot and the chariot ride. District 12 stylist has yet to show up. All 4 of our main characters here are in paper gowns covered in insecticides. The prep team has done what they can to like reshape their hair and help them feel and look presentable, but they have no clothes. Haymitch asks where their clothes from the reaping are, and that's when we learn that they've been incinerated. So if the District 12 stylist, if he doesn't show up, they're going to have to do this chariot ride and introduce themselves to the entire nation in flimsy paper robes. The stylist is infamous for being really shitty and not really ever preparing because no one cares about District 12. District 12 stylist, Magno, does eventually show up though, and he has 2 tiny snakes dangling from his ears, and he tells us that they'll be dead within a few hours. Apparently, live reptile fashion is something that has been outlawed or banned, but Magno has some sort of like toad-licking drug problem, so he's really obsessed with reptiles, not in a way that makes him want to care for and love them, but in a way that makes him want to wear them as accessories until they die. He arrives and he's like, you're welcome, and he gives them the coal mining costumes that have been worn by District 12 tributes for an indeterminate amount of years. They are sweaty and soiled. District 12 is the last chariot to go out, and they're arriving late because of the whole Magno fiasco. Horses take off. Haymitch notes that the entire crowd seems to be really drunk and rowdy. Someone sets off a road firework into the chariot lane, and it leads to the horses going sort of mad. Understandable. Because the chariot situation has gone haywire, District 12 tributes are thrown from their chariot. Luella hits the ground and dies on impact. We know that, one, Haymitch has hoped that they would die together, and to immediately lose her this early is so jarring for us as a reader, but also for Haymitch. But she was not a number. She was a little girl I met on the day she was born when Mr. McCoy, his face alight with joy, held her up at the window for all the kids to see. And while Lenore Dove will forever be my true love, Luella is my one and only sweetheart. Obviously, this statement hits so hard because we know that Haymitch will come to call Katniss his sweetheart. So that tells us a lot about what Haymitch thinks of Katniss. And Katniss does not have amazing social awareness, and we'll definitely dive into that. She is always thinking that Haymitch is calling her sweetheart in a derogatory way, and he is tweaking his tone to make sure it sounds that way, but this new understanding of the word gives us a lot of insight into what he may have been feeling and what he was thinking when Katniss volunteered as tribute. So Haymitch decides to do something about this. He has his pa's voice in his head. Don't let them paint their poster with your blood. So Haymitch is making his own poster. He picks up the now lifeless body of Luella and he runs her toward the president. He's going to deliver Luella to the president. He ends up stealing the District 1 chariot, which is kind of the least derailed chariot, so to speak. Haymitch is the only tribute that arrives at the presidential mansion. He lays Luella's body at President Snow's feet and he starts clapping, effectively blaming Snow or holding Snow accountable for the death of this little girl. Haymitch knows that he will be punished for this and definitely won't survive the games, but he really didn't think he was going to survive anyway. And he also understands now that none of this is going to be aired, so only the people present will see this spectacle. Haymitch has new understanding into the way that the Hunger Games is presented to the people of the districts. They are often told that a lot of events are live that they know now are not live. They're told that the reapings are live, and the reapings clearly are not live, otherwise everyone would have seen Woodbine Chance get shot on TV, and they didn't. So it's all pretend. Haymitch is understanding that it's all pretend, and he doesn't get to control the narrative despite his action. Tributes are taken from the chariot race to their apartment. This is when we meet Wyrus and Mags. Because District 12 does not have a victor to mentor, Wyrus and Mags have been tapped as substitute mentors, so to speak. Wyrus won the previous year's games, and Haymitch finds this particularly discouraging because it means that she doesn't know how to mentor because she just won the games. And he also sort of invalidates or discredits her win because she did not have to do any fighting. Her arena was made entirely of mirrors. Terrifying. Her arena was made entirely of mirrors, so no one really knows how she survived. She managed to outsmart the arena she was in, and thus did not necessarily have to participate in the games, while all the other tributes killed each other off, or themselves, by running into mirrors. If you've ever been in a hall of mirrors, you know how disorienting it is. She does give the tributes lots of useful advice, though, and she does prove to be a really valuable mentor, and she seems a little odd, but she is helpful. The second mentor that they have is Mags. She won the 11th Hunger Games, so the year after Lucy Gray. Haymitch is also discouraged, not necessarily because he thinks that these mentors will be unhelpful, but because he thinks, of course, they're going to be unhelpful. If any of us survive, they're going to be ostracized in their district because it means they aided District 12 tribute in surviving and returning home at the expense of whichever districts they happen to be from. Mags is from 4, Wyrus is from 3. Mags proves to be extremely kind, very emotionally intuitive. She makes sure that the children are eating, and she asks them what they want other than to survive. She knows that they want to survive, but maybe what they really want is to not die in specific ways, and so each of the kids gives their sort of last wishes. Mags also tells us that what she really wanted in her games was her district partner to survive, and we know that her district partner did not survive because Mags is standing here today. All the tributes end up sleeping in the same room, taking turns keeping watch, so to speak, but there's a little bit of comfort in numbers, despite the fact that this was a pretty fractioned group of kids when they left District 12. Now they're the only remnant of home that they have. This is when Haymitch learns that Maisley does not like dressing like her twin. She says, my mother likes that. Haymitch deduces that the reason that she's wearing all this jewelry is maybe not to be show-offy, but because it's her only form of self-expression. We move into training, and Panache, I don't know if I'm saying that right, and Panache from District 1 ends up attacking Haymitch because of the whole chariot situation, because Haymitch stole Panache's chariot and was able to make kind of a name for himself amongst the capital citizens that were watching the chariot parade. While this goes on, the tributes are actually armed because they're in training, and there's not that many peacekeepers around, right? The tributes outnumber the peacekeepers. The peacekeepers break up this fight. It's brought to Haymitch's attention that they might have been able to take the people in this room. They might have succeeded if it came down to hand-to-hand combat, given the fact that they were armed. And Plutarch, who was apparently filming the whole thing, says, yeah, so why didn't you? Haymitch thinks this is kind of a slight and sort of ignores it, but it does speak to the broader theme of the book, and it will come up later. Haymitch also finds out that the Capitol News is presenting this opening ceremony as flawless, and Haymitch says, well, yeah, I doubt people that watch Capitol News will even question that. Why would they challenge anything that Capitol News tells them? They believe everything they're told. They are not thinking critically. This is when we meet Ampert. The first thing Ampert does is ask if Haymitch would like to be his ally. And he is the child of Beatty. We know Beatty, and we'll get into more of his story later. It's laid out for Haymitch that the reason that Ampert was reaped was specifically to punish Beatty because he got caught amidst some sort of rebel plot. Beatty is regarded by the Capitol as too valuable to kill, so they're just gonna try to incentivize him by punishing the people that he loves most. So Ampert, we come to know him as hopeful and smart and resourceful and kind, and he has a plan. He believes, even though his dad is pretty sure that he is headed towards certain death, Ampert believes that if he can get the rest of the tributes to ally themselves against the careers, they might have a shot. He thinks that they can have the numbers. And so he pitches this plan to Haymitch, and Haymitch says, like, hey, I don't really know if you want me as an ally because I sort of just made a spectacle of myself and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be gunned for, but hey, good luck with that. I believe in you. Ampert says, my dad wants to talk to you, and so Haymitch goes and talks to BT. BT's station in training is how to get a potato to fuel a light bulb. They begin a relationship wherein BT brings Haymitch into his newest rebel plot, which is to break the arena. Because Ampert's going in, he knows that Ampert will have the resources and the tools and the know-how to break the arena in the way that they want to, but they need Haymitch as sort of like the muscle in the body because he's 16 years old. So BT puts a lot of faith and trust into Haymitch by telling him this. Haymitch wonders, wow, okay, so you were reaped and you're a victor and your son was reaped. Are you just the unluckiest family in Panem? No, it was rigged. Also through training, Haymitch tells us that he's sort of clinging to his memories with Lenore Dove, and it leads him to this conclusion that, hey, nothing you can take was ever worth keeping. They can't take his memories of Lenore Dove and the love that he has for her. Reminiscing on those memories makes him feel stronger. So he recognizes that what really makes him strong is not material and thus cannot be taken from him. This is a concept that he will waffle on, and I think that's really important. I think Suzanne Collins shows us Haymitch waffling because we waffle, right? Like sometimes you doubt yourself, and self-doubt is a really important part of belief. Haymitch is taken to Plutarch's house, and he's a little bit worried that he's about to be executed. Plutarch has a library, which is something that is really, really uncommon in the nation of Panem. In fact, a lot of the books have been burned. We don't know the exact circumstances of the reason that the books have been burned, but Haymitch believes it was the resource of it all. Books are made of paper, and paper fuels fire. He also says that Lenore Dove would love this library, and she really enjoys entering the world of books, and Haymitch, whenever he can get his hands on one, always snatches up a book and he brings it to her. And there's a funny little thing where he says one time he got her a book that was on taking care of chickens, even though she's a goose girl, and she loved it anyway, which is just tells us so much about these people. So Haymitch comes to find out that the reason he's been brought to Plutarch's house is because President Snow is there. And President Snow and his method for keeping power has been ultimately deteriorating him from the inside. He used to have a smooth voice. He used to be attractive. Now it's deteriorated into a raspy growl. I don't think the word growl is unintentional here, if the suit fits. So the reason that his throat and vocal cords effectively deteriorated is because Snow poisons the people that challenge his power or that disappoint him, but he also eats the food that the person he is in the act of murdering is eating to avoid suspicion. But drinking from the poison cup means he also experiences the poisoning. Good. And he has to subsist on a diet of bread and milk. There's real implications there too. So Snow is in Plutarch's library and he starts like vomiting up this like black sludge and he asks for milk. And Plutarch sends Haymitch to go get milk out of his like mini fridge. Haymitch, recognizing this as a form of power that he literally has over the president of the nation, downs the milk. He drinks the milk. He says, sorry, it's empty. Plutarch's eyes widen, which indicate that he knows what Haymitch has done and the bravery and the rebellion that must exist inside of him for him to have done that. Plutarch finds some more milk. Snow drinks it, and he's doing better, and he asks Plutarch for more milk and more bread, and so Haymitch and Snow are in a room together alone for the first time. Snow's eyes zone immediately in on that necklace, and we know that Snow has a history with the Covey, and this is clearly Covey made. Snow asks to see it, and there's a power imbalance there. What the fuck is Haymitch gonna do? Be like, no, you can't see it. So he hands it over, which is very, very, very hard for him to do, but he manages to do it, and Snow actually notices an inscription on the striker that Haymitch hadn't noticed, and it says 4H, I love you like all fire. This expression confirms for Snow that this is definitely Covey made, and Snow sort of tries to warn Haymitch about the Covey, and he insists that the Covey are trouble and they're not good news. That's fucking rich coming from him. He also insists that all birds are vicious. Said the murderer of children and birds alike. But the reason that Haymitch is really at Plutarch's mansion is Snow wants to personally deliver Lulu. Lulu is Luella's replacement, and she looks effectively like a carbon copy of Luella, but is clearly not her because Luella is dead. This girl is a hostage who has been starved, tortured, beaten, and cosmetically altered to look like Luella so that the people of Panem have 4 districts from District 12. So the people of the districts and the people of the capital will be none the wiser because this girl will play Luella. Haymitch and the rest of the newcomers call her Lulu because it does not feel okay to call her Luella. She seems to have some sort of device implanted in her ear that gives her instruction and also screams at her or punishes her in some way if she's doing something wrong. She's a listening device that's put in the middle of all District 12 tributes, so they can no longer communicate freely. There's cameras in the corner of all the apartments, so they were 100% being surveilled, but it's just an extra piece. They can't talk around Lulu. She's also been implanted with some sort of pump that administers a sedative when the capital wants to knock her out. She's been turned into a jabberjay. This is horrifying, but Haymitch does get some comfort out of this conversation with Snow because Snow guarantees that Lenore Dove and his family will live happy and long lives as long as Haymitch dies in the arena. Back in training the next day, Ampert and Haymitch successfully convince all the other tributes to join the Newcomers Alliance. This is something that they were really resistant to because this is the first time in history that anyone has seen such a show of camaraderie between districts. And Maisley has become like an older sister to pretty much all the tributes. She's helping them weave their tokens into necklaces. District 9 particularly is reluctant to join the newcomers because they believe it means they might be targeted by the careers. The careers really shoot themselves in the foot because they end up targeting District 9 because they're the only district not in an alliance. Panache actually goes up to one of the District 9 tribute girls and he smashes her token, which is a sunflower, and he steals her food. Games or no games, if you got a decent bone in your body, you fucking hate a bully. Games or no games, if you got a decent bone in your body, you fucking hate a bully. Games or no games, if you got a decent bone in your body, you fucking hate a bully. She immediately starts crying. Haymitch says there's silent tears running down her cheeks. Haymitch approaches them and he offers kindness and food. He gives away his lunch because he can't eat because of the whole Luella stuff and, you know, the whole everything of it all. And Maisley is able to fix the girl's token, effectively securing the alliance. Haymitch and Maisley are the oldest of the newcomers and maybe the most able-bodied, which makes them not the leaders. Ampert is the leader, but makes them the muscle of the group. I refreshed my beverage. I would not advise entering into the universe without a cup of tea. It's a very regulating beverage. Get whatever kind you like. We're back with the tributes in their apartment, and they're preparing their interview strategies. It's known amongst tributes that you can't really present yourself authentically for the Capitol because what you're doing in these interviews is essentially making a case as to why it is worthwhile to bet on you in the Hunger Games. Because even if you don't believe you have any shot at winning, having some sort of sponsor can reduce your suffering in the games by quite a bit. Magno, big shock, has fucking abandoned District 12 again. Due to Magno's absence, prep team has completely dissolved into a fit of tears. They think this means they're not going to get a good grade. She throws herself into a chair next to a table holding a burnt orange telephone. Shit. She's like wailing, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. She thinks that this means that her future is destroyed. This is a particularly disgusting thing to say in the face of 3 children that are effectively headed towards certain death, totally preoccupied with how this is going to affect their lives. This is when we get the arrival of Effie Trinket. Effie Trinket is the older sister of one of the girls on Haymitch's prep team. We learn that she has a long resume. Namely, she's the president of Capital Cohorts chapter, sort of type A sorority girl. She comes to save her little sister's future. And ultimately, the day for the rest of these tributes. She says a couple things in here that tell us a lot about sentiment in the Capitol. She arrives with a vintage wardrobe. We learn that Haymitch's outfit actually belonged to like great uncle Trinket. And he actually disgraced the Trinket family in some way. It's unknown how, but we can assume that it has nothing to do with rebellion because one of the prep team members confides in Effie and says, my grandfather was a rebel sympathizer. And she's like, well, look at you now. So being a rebel sympathizer is known as sort of the worst thing you can do as a Capitol citizen. It looks like capital or class betrayal. The Trinkets and the prep teams are a huge upgrade from Drusilla and Magno because they might be clueless and ignorant, but at least they're not mean and beating the shit out of them. She also believes very strongly in the Hunger Games. She's swallowed everything she's been fed since birth. She says there's something bigger than you or I happening here. The Hunger Games are a sacred ceremony, remembrance for the dark days. A lot of people lost their lives to guarantee peace and prosperity for our nation. It is our chance, no, our duty to honor them. So that sucks, but she really does save the day. We also learn that Effie's main ammunition, or the thing that no one could take from her, is a positive attitude. She firmly believes that a positive attitude is 97% of the battle. She believes that if you don't have hope, if you don't have belief, there's really no point in engaging with life anyway. And obviously, the stakes of her situation have never been as high as any of the stakes of any of the District 12 tributes. But it does lend her a little bit more credit because when we meet Effie Trinket later in the series, you probably have a lot of disdain for her. I know I certainly did because she is complicit in participating in something that's really, really disgusting. And knowing that she was there the first time anyone in this generation witnessed District 12 become a victor, it maybe cements this for her, that a positive attitude is a lot of the battle. So when she gets up there and she's smiling and she says ladies first, and it seems like she can read the room, but is gaslighting the room anyway, maybe what she's not doing is gaslighting them, but trying to encourage them in the way that she knows how. So it gives Effie a lot more credit, but in this way, a little more credit. She's fully bought into the Capitol propaganda, but she seems to be a good person. Can you be a good person and bought into Capitol propaganda? Yes, I think we all have light and dark inside of us. We are all capable of good. We are all capable of destruction. Some of us do a lot more damage than others, but I think Haymitch and any other tribute's participation in the games and the eventual victors understand this most clearly. Light and dark exists in all of us, always. You get to choose which one you act on. And Effie is acting on the light while being fueled by the dark. So Haymitch is dressed in the suit of Effie's deceased and disgraced relative. It's a 3-piece suit, described as rakish, which is a word I only know from Bridgerton, embroidered with cocktail glasses, another poke of the bruise, right? Haymitch has told us he's not a drinker, he's told us that he has no intention of being a drinker, but we know that Haymitch is going to spend his life at the bottom of a bottle. So it's particularly apt. Oh, something I should mention. Haymitch has been given a 1 for his training score. It's maybe like the first time in history anyone's ever been given a 1. And the reason he's been given a 1 is because President Snow insisted that the game makers give him a 1. It puts Katniss's 11 into a different context. Maybe Snow had backed away from the Hunger Games. By the time the 74th has taken place, Seneca Crane seems to have a lot of agency and autonomy that game makers in 50 AD did not have. So they're working out their strategies, how they're going to present themselves to Caesar Flickerman and effectively Panem. Maisley is quick and sharp with her words, and she plans to use this. She's labeled as the shrew. She can bully just about anyone, and it's magnificent to watch. It's not awesome to learn that she called Haymitch Itchy Itchy Haymitchy when he had scabies as a kid, but she is really, really good at bullying the people of the capital. So her aim is that she's take no shit, and she's full of wit. I didn't mean to rhyme. Wyatt's angle is he is the human calculator. He's regarded as like neurodivergent coded, but I think almost all the characters we meet from District 12 seem to be neurodivergent, particularly Katniss. I'm going to give you my evidence for that in the future. But he can effectively calculate the odds of anything at any time. So what he's going to do with Caesar is prove that he is an asset, not only because he's a part of the Newcomers Alliance, he will always know where he stands, which should aid him. Lulu can't really prep because she's not really there. She's extremely traumatized and legitimately brainwashed, and also has someone giving her instructions in her brain, and she is also 13 years old. Before they go on stage, before the tributes are set to go do their thing, Magno shows up, fucking yay, and he has a bunch of live reptiles. He's like, yeah, this is what I'm dressing my tributes in. The reason that they knew that Magno wasn't going to show up at the apartment is because apparently the toad-licking rumors were true, and they think he OD'd that day. But it turns out he didn't OD, and maybe this is why he shows up the way that he does, but he comes with live reptiles, and he's gonna place it on one of the tributes. And the peacekeepers are about to intervene, but Lulu sees the snake and feels immediately at home. She puts the snake on her shoulders, and it wraps itself around her, and she seems to derive a lot of comfort out of the snake. This parallels her to Lucy Gray, who is a friend of the snakes and a friend of all animals. Good people are friends of animals. Haymitch is gonna play up his bootlegging angle. We've already learned from context in the conversation that Effie just had, and, you know, the point of the books, that being a rebel is particularly traitorous and about as low as you can go as it relates to capital offenses. Haymitch can't really play up his rebellion angle. What he's going for instead is a rascal angle. And he's going to play up the fact that he's a bootlegger. Because while alcohol is illegal in District 12, it's not illegal in the capital, right? Like, everyone's drunk. So he knows that he's not going to be judged for this. He might actually be praised and admired for this. And he's right. Drusilla does one thing to aid the tributes of District 12, and that is she approaches Caesar and tells them their angles, effectively repeating in her head, shrew, calculator, lunatic, rascal. Something that we already know, but gets expanded upon, is that Maisley Donner is the original owner of Katniss's Mockingjay pin. It was forged for her by Tan Amber and given to her as a gift. Lenore Dove had told Haymitch that Maisley did not like the gift, she thought it was ugly, and she threw it in the back of a drawer, and Lenore Dove even contemplated breaking into their house to steal it back. It doesn't belong in the back of your drawer. It's also made of solid gold. I'll remind you again that Haymitch's underwear is made of a flour sack. So the idea that she would have something that's solid gold and find it useless is very hard to relate to. For the folks of District 12. So Haymitch brings up the Mockingjay pin, and she wrinkles her nose. She was like, it's well made, of course, but she doesn't care for Mockingjays. Something that's half mutt seems very unnatural to me. And that's a fair argument. That's different than her saying, this is ugly, I don't want this. And it's a call forward to a few conversations, one that takes place in Catching Fire and one that takes place in Mockingjay. It's a call forward to when Gale says, I don't want anything they made in the Capitol, sort of insinuating that Katniss has been made in the Capitol. We're going to talk about that. Oh yes, we will. But Peeta, when he's brainwashed, referring to Katniss as a mutt, a capital mutt. So every single word in this book not only means something, not only has historical reference, not only has modern day current event reference, but also is referencing itself. The layers of this book are at least 4 deep. Okay, so they get to the interviews, and obviously the interviews go in order, and so the first tributes to walk the stage are career tributes, and Caesar Flickerman makes them look really stupid, which is initially something that Haymitch delights in because obviously, one, Panache attacked him, but he's being made to look like he's all brawn and no brain. And that's good news for Haymitch, who can be both brawn and brain. But what he ultimately comes to understand as the people of the capital are like cracking up at Panache's expense before he goes and fights for his life is that Caesar has just sabotaged Panache's interview. And the joke's not just on Panache, it's on all us brainless district piglets. It also is Haymitch realizing for the first time what Katniss will realize in Catching Fire, that remember who the real enemy is. This is happening for Haymitch because of Caesar. Before the interviews begin, there's sort of a buffet table, and Haymitch approaches BT at the buffet table. So BT tells Haymitch that District 9's sunflower tokens have all been replaced with explosive coated in shellac that can be dissolved with water. And he tells Haymitch that Ampert's going to be responsible for collecting these tokens and making sure they get to Haymitch. He's going to collect tokens off dead bodies. While these interviews are going on, Haymitch is mulling over whether or not he can trust BT, and he's like, well, listen, BT's certainly going out on a fucking line to trust me, so I probably should. Haymitch says from this point on, the games evolved from pure punishment to unapologetic entertainment. The newcomers are going one by one, and they are presenting their case, and they're coming across as really articulate, really composed, really intelligent, and like they maybe have a shot, right? Like this new alliance means something really different for the Hunger Games. It means the Hunger Games is going to look really different, particularly because there's double the tributes in each field. So the newcomers do have the numbers, and they're doing a really good job presenting that to Caesar. But by the time we get to District 12, right, because the careers are only Districts 1, 2, and 4, are all tributes that have been speaking really selflessly on behalf of the Alliance and really aligning themselves with everybody else. But Haymitch tells us that selflessness and quiet resolve don't make for awesome TV, so by the time we get to District 12, Caesar's asking really different questions. He's asking questions that are more pointed at these individual tributes, so they don't get a chance to talk about the Alliance. This explains why, when Katniss and Peeta are watching the recaps of Haymitch's Hunger Games, they don't see any mention of the Alliance. Maisley goes, and she does an amazing job just sort of tearing down the fashion sense, the gauche and tackiness of the people of the capital. Wyatt does an awesome job calculating odds. They bring out a game maker to use a calculator to prove that he's correct. They can't throw a math problem at him that he can't solve. And then Luella goes, and she's doing a good job because she has her snake, so she is looking pretty fierce. Things take a turn for the worse, though, when Caesar asks what she's going to do if the newcomers are successful and they manage to kill off all the careers. And Luella ends up growling, "You'll murder us. You'll murder us." And then she starts screaming over and over and over again. Someone remotely activates her pump, and she is sedated on television, and Wyatt is allowed to go back on stage and can carry her body off stage. That's pretty fucking tragic. And also, she's right. So Haymitch is sort of panicking about the angle that he's going to present, and he tells us that who he's thinking of is one Woodbine Chance. And Woodbine Chance had apparently rascal energy. So what Haymitch does in his interview is sort of channel Woodbine Chance, who should have been standing here in his place. He manages not to talk about Hattie at all. He sort of takes all the credit for the bootlegging operation so as not to get her in trouble. But he does throw the peacekeepers and his head peacekeeper under the bus, because Caesar's like, "Isn't that illegal?" And he's like, well, head peacekeeper sure doesn't seem to think so when he's buying it off me or whatever. So he plays up the bootlegger angle. He's saying, you don't really know what my training score is because I've pissed off the game makers and they're clearly doing this in retribution, not as a reflection of my actual skill. He comes across as a rascal, so much so that Caesar labels him a rascal when their interview ends. And as he comes off stage, he gets a hug from Mags, and Wyrus tells him that he has secured sponsors. After the interviews, Plutarch asks if he can take the District 12 tributes back to his house because they never got a proper photo shoot, and he'd like to film a photo shoot for some propos, and they're all dressed up, so let's just do it. Haymitch finds out that this has all basically been a ruse so that Plutarch can talk to Haymitch individually, and he says, "Listen, Haymitch, I know you don't like me, and you certainly don't trust me, but you should know that, despite appearances, a desire for freedom is not limited to the districts, and your misfortune does not give you the right to assume so." So Plutarch and Haymitch are speaking unsurveilled for the second time since Haymitch has been abducted and brought to the capital, and Plutarch, in an effort to get Haymitch to trust him, hands him a telephone, and Haymitch picks up that phone, and who is on the phone but Lenore Dove? They get their goodbye, and it's facilitated by Plutarch, which is interesting. Lenore Dove tells Haymitch that she's been detained by peacekeepers for singing her illegal songs. Those illegal songs are The Hanging Tree, The Capitol Store, and The Goose in the Common. We know that Lucy Gray wrote The Hanging Tree. We don't know who to credit with The Capitol Store, but we do know that Lenore Dove wrote The Goose in the Common. They talk on the phone. They're able to say, I love you to one another. And Lenore Dove tells him that she's going to be released in the morning. We come to find out that that actually wasn't true. That was her sacrificing herself so that he doesn't worry about her. He also knows that he should tell her that she should go live a long, happy life because she says, I love you like all fire, and I will love you forever, and I will be mourning you forever. You are my true love. Chills, literal goosebumps. But he doesn't. He doesn't end up releasing her from, the bounds that are their true love. I don't think it would matter what he says in the same way that I don't think it matters that he told Sid to be the man of the house, right? Like, it seems like the people that love Haymitch know who he is. Haymitch can tell her, right? Like, move on, whatever. But the truth is, if your true love was reaped in the Hunger Games and then murdered on live TV, you're not going to move on from that, regardless of the fact that they told you to. So it's okay, but it's something that Haymitch really self-flagellates for later on in the games. And I want you to remember that, right? Like, because we as humans take these moments that we consider mistakes and they become a lot bigger than the moments that aren't necessarily mistakes. Lenore Dove, I love you like all fire. That's for always. I love you like all fire too. You and no one else. Just like my geese. I mate for life. And then some. Forever. I need to say no. Don't spend your life grieving me. Love whoever you want. But he doesn't. More chills. So after they hang up the phone, Plutarch's like, hey, I know you don't trust me. You don't have to confirm that you trust me in any way, shape, or form, but let me just give you some information that BT wanted me to give you. Plutarch tells him that the only things he knows about the arena are this. The sun in the arena is going to be positioned in the same way that the outside sun is, that the real sun is. So when the sun rises in the east, Haymitch will know which direction is north. This is important because the brain that Haymitch, BT, and Ampert are trying to drown, they're trying to break the arena by drowning the brain of the arena to prove a point about the Hunger Games. They think that this might end the Hunger Games or at least result in this year's Hunger Games being a failure, and that's particularly important because it's the Quarter Quell and the Capitol has spared no expense. So in order to know which direction is north, Haymitch does need this information that Plutarch has just given him. That being said, he can't know if he can trust that information, right? Like, the second thing he learns is about berms, little mounds of earth. Haymitch learns that these berms are where mutations or mutts will enter the arena from. So all of these berms that maybe hold flowers or maybe don't are entrances into sublevel A of the arena. Plutarch tells us that the Capitol tries to maintain the image that the arena is run completely remotely, but that's not true. Apparently there's a level underneath the arena where certain things, whether they be mutations or specific events, are manually triggered. Since the sun rises in the east, Haymitch can deduce which direction is north and thus carry out what feels like his last mission or his only purpose for being alive at this moment, as the Capitol has stripped everything else from him. Okay, Plutarch also tells him that the games are the most effective piece of Capitol propaganda that they have. It's only a real tool or a weapon if the Capitol controls the narrative. So he advises Haymitch, don't let us control the narrative. This gives us insight into why Katniss is so dangerous, right? Like, because she volunteers as tribute, she immediately skews the narrative that District 12 has no volunteers because they're being sentenced to certain death. Getting a high score in training despite being the runt girl from District 12. Allying with Rue, and then, of course, the way that she buries Rue in flowers after her death. And, of course, pulling out the berries. Katniss is in charge of her narrative until, of course, the rebels and Peeta hijack that narrative, right, with like the love story and the pregnancy and the Mockingjay of it all. She's willing to present herself authentically without regard for consequence, seemingly despite herself. She can't help it. She's engaged with the present moment, and that means advocating for justice. Pretty much at all times. Plutarch says, public opinion is driven by emotion. People have an emotional response to something, then they come up with an argument for why it logically makes sense. This is Plutarch explaining, in some ways, intellectualization, but in a lot of ways, emotional immaturity, right? Because we've seen Snow do this, right? When he's a peacekeeper and he's moving through the seam, right, he feels distress at the amount of want and impoverishment that he is witness to. And so he finds something to do with that emotion and he projects it onto the people around him. So instead of recognizing that something has been provoked inside of him, he's saying, you evoked that emotion in me. The idea that the Hunger Games are at all natural, all the reasons that they have for the Hunger Games are just logical explanations for the way that they actually feel, which is afraid. Even President Snow. It's just an explanation for his fear. It's his way, ironically enough, of maintaining control of the illusion of his reality. And we know that Dr. Gall has said that the Hunger Games is the thing that pulls back the veneer of illusion on how fragile our society is. But this is Plutarch saying that the opposite is true. That an emotionally immature person finds justifications for what they feel, rather than recognizing that something inside them has been triggered. It's probably theirs to sort out. I'm talking about things like racism. I'm talking about misogyny. I'm talking about xenophobia. I'm talking about a lot of things. Haymitch and Plutarch rejoin the other tributes, and they're going to film some propos. Plutarch tells us that one of the reasons that the audience is finding District 12 so engaging this year is because they're not trying to be like the Capitol, right? In the way that that tributes from District 1 and 2 are sometimes accused of being. They're not trying to pretend that they are Capitol. This is really interesting, especially because it's followed up by this line. There's been a lot of concern in the Capitol lately that district citizens are aspiring to break in here. This line implies that the pathway to citizenship that Strabo Plinth was able to utilize in order to get Sejanus Plinth into the academy and his family and move from District 2 to the Capitol is no longer available. Like, if that's true, obviously the depths of Snow's depravity know no bounds, right? Like, there is no rock bottom for this fucking guy. If that's true, like, it's just such a throwaway thing that Collins gives us. We know that Coriolanus Snow would not have won the Plinth Prize without the Plinths, goes without saying. We also know that he wouldn't have a high school diploma without Strabo Plinth and Sejanus Plinth, and we know that the Plinths semi-adopt him. When he's 18 years old, they end up funding his education and his wardrobe and his housing. So if he literally has made immigration impossible after only securing his future off the backs of immigrants, like, it's just a lot. So the District 12 tributes and Plutarch write some propaganda of their own. They decide that they need a new name for the careers because the newcomers have a name. So they want kind of like a catchy thing to disparage them with in the propos. Plutarch says, we need some wordplay, something clever or rhyming or catchy, but not crude. This is a family show. This murder show is for families. Don't swear. God. Whatever. Haymitch, another poke of the bruise, ends up coming with the name Near Beer. It's what they sell in the Capitol store. So if you only have scrip, which is what your salary would be paid in, you would not be able to buy legitimate alcohol because the only alcohol you could get was Near Beer, and it's all foam and no beer. The joke is it wouldn't get your grandma tipsy. Near Beer career. Plutarch seems to be really happy with the footage, and he gives us this little insert that is literally a dig at AI. He sighs when he mentions the tools that were abolished and incapacitated in the past, ones deemed fated to destroy humanity because of their ability to replicate any scenario using any person. And in mere seconds, he snaps his fingers. She's saying the people of Panem, the people that founded the Hunger Games, thought AI was too dangerous. Yikes. So it's the last night before the games, and Mags hugs every single one of these kids, and she tells them they've all been remarkable. Haymitch is entering the arena injured. He's bruised his hands, and he has a tear in his shoulder from when Panache attacked him in training. Obviously, Maisley is covered in bruises and welts. They're both entering injured, just like Peta, just like Lucy Gray. Haymitch is in his first ever airplane with his tribute partners and the tributes from District 11, and they all get their trackers, and we learn that the trackers are reusable. They're collected from all tributes, dead or alive, but they needed 24 extra this year. So it's when they're being flown to the arena that Lulu starts singing a song. And the people of District 11, the tributes of District 11 are like, what the heck? Like, how does she know that song? Do you guys sing that song? And Haymitch is like, no, we don't sing that song. And all these folks are in an alliance, right? So they've been sharing information. They're like, well, that's a harvest song that the children of our district sing. How does she know it? And Haymitch is like, that's not Luella. We have no idea who that is. We think she's from District 11 because she seemed really drawn to bread or grain from District 11. And obviously this song maybe confirms it for us, but they have no idea who she is. It doesn't matter where they took her from. We're all on the same side, 11 or 12. This brings us to the 50th Hunger Games, the Second Quarter Quell. So the cornucopia seems to be packed with weapons and provisions as usual, but that is significantly important this year because everything in this arena, Haymitch quickly deduces, is poisonous, even the air. I do not relish saying familiar. Haymitch is able to escape the cornucopia with a backpack and a knife. And inside of that backpack, he finds 2 jugs of water. He finds some hard-boiled eggs. He finds some potatoes. He wonders if the game makers are sort of laughing at him and if he should just ditch the pack because it's very, very heavy. And the arena seems to be abundant or ripe with fruit and water and so on. He drinks from a stream and seems to be immediately poisoned. Well, actually, he sees a bunny drink from a stream and then the bunny immediately dies. What he also has in his pack is charcoal tablets, which I guess are anti-poison tablets. This is all interconnected with the snow of it all because we do know that Snow's weapon of choice is poison. Haymitch had prepared the newcomers. He told them that he wasn't going to be able to stick with them because he is being targeted by the game maker, so he's really going to bring them more trouble than aid or a resource. So Haymitch is by himself, and he's heading north because we know that he's trying to drown the brain of the arena. He has his own secret mission, and he can't share that with the newcomers. But to the people of the districts, it's probably looking like Haymitch immediately abandoned the newcomers after promising that he'd be in alliance with them. And outside of Wyatt and Maisley, he was really their only muscle. We later learned that Maisley also had to take off right away, so Wyatt was the only one left defending the newcomers. So Haymitch has drank poison water. He is curled up in a ball like he's pretty sure he's gonna die, but he chews the charcoal tablets, he gets them down, and he ends up throwing up the poison, but that doesn't mean that his body isn't left like ravaged by the poison for a little while after, and he has to kind of take shelter. The first night in the arena, he sees Wyatt's picture projected. It looks like Wyatt died in the slaughter, and Haymitch knows instinctively that he must have died protecting Lulu. Haymitch is heading north and scouting for berms. All the while, the berms are labeled with brass plaques, so they can tell what each flower or plant or fruit is. Haymitch has slept in a bush, and he's actually sharing an apple with a bunny, which is, sort of goes to show who he is at his core. He's sharing a piece of his very limited food supply with a bunny in the arena. He's doing this to test to see if it was poisonous, but he's also looking to share. The apple he eats is delicious, and then he's immediately taken off guard because his ankle is yanked and he's pulled out from his bush. He thinks he's about to die. Who is it? None other than Lulu. She points to her ear and says, "Find Haymitch." So the game makers have instructed Lulu to find Haymitch so that he is forced to utilize resources, keeping her alive. Haymitch recognizes that the reason that Lulu was able to find him is because when he burrowed into the bush, not only did he leave an enormous hole, so like if anyone else had stumbled across this bush, he probably would have been murdered in his sleep, but he also left a white handkerchief outside the bush on accident. I think this is a callback to President Snow, and what got him caught? The handkerchief. Right? It's everywhere, the imprints, the fingerprints of what has happened before. Haymitch shares his resources with Lulu. Probably she's also been sent to him to make the games more interesting because Haymitch has kind of become a star in his own right of the games, so him just being by himself would be really boring. They have a lot of incentives for maybe sending Lulu his way. Haymitch is feeding Lulu. They've built a fire. They're able to find a stone that works off his striker, and so he's able to make fire more readily. The entire time they've been walking together, right, the two are heading north in each other's company. Haymitch has had to keep Lulu from devouring any of the fruits on the trees that are all poisonous by continually giving her his resources. She does find a bee balm plant, and I guess it smells like home. Also, bee balm is a healing plant, so this is a particularly duplicitous and like malicious thing for the game makers to do. Lulu gets really close to the bee balm plant and she's inhaling it and rubbing her face in it, and it turns out it was also poisonous. She kind of suffers a long and agonizing death. He says for a moment he can't tell the difference between Lulu and Luella, and he ends up screaming up into the sky, "Enough, she is not your plaything, end this," because he knows that they could end it because she's implanted with a device that could effectively kill her in a more merciful way. Haymitch won't release Lulu's body in a way that's really reminiscent of Katniss with Rue. He wants one final message to the game makers that Lulu couldn't say herself. He calls the game makers murderers. He accuses them of being murderers, and they fucking are. Haymitch is holding Lulu's body and hiding under a tree, and there are taserous butterflies that are sent to zap him and get him away from her body. He actually ends up going to a gas plant and using his flint striker to make a sort of like makeshift flamethrower and kill a lot of the butterflies that are zapping him. And when that happens, he recognizes that his shirt ends up glowing. So we know that his shirt has the technology that made him sort of look like coal, a glowing bed of coal, which is also a call forward to Katniss Everdeen, the girl on fire, and the coal beds that they're eventually dressed in. It also clues us into the fact that, I mean, we don't know how old Cinna is, but it's possible he saw this, and this is why he ended up designing the technology he did for Katniss and Peeta's big entrance. It's just a theory. Haymitch ends up climbing 30 feet into a branch and crying and grieving the death of Lulu and the death of Luella, and he thinks to himself, at least this is a conversation I've been spared. I don't have to answer to her family. Particularly tragic because we know it's not a conversation that he gets spared. This is when Ampert finds Haymitch. Ampert has also had virtually no food, so Haymitch shares his resources with Ampert as well, and he reaches into his pocket and he gives Haymitch Wyatt's token, and he does confirm that Wyatt died protecting Lulu, and he was successful because Lulu made it to Haymitch. Another poke of the bruise. I remember how Mama always said, when there's life, there's hope. But from where I'm sitting, hope seems a lot like white liquor. It can fool you in the short run, but like as not, you'll end up paying for it twice. So this is that other moment, right? Like life is a cycle of hoping and believing and feeling purpose and then being disappointed and feeling like you failed, and having to start over and having to go again and having to maybe stay down for a minute before you somehow find the strength to get back up. So Haymitch is in this moment saying that hope is not worthwhile. In fact, he's saying that hope is more painful than resignation. This book is a dance. It's about hope and failure and believing and being squashed down and then staying down and then somehow finding the strength to get back up and then having hope again and then failing again. It's about disappointment and hope and belief. Ampert and Haymitch are successful in finding a way to enter sublevel A of the arena, though. Execute BT's plan, and Haymitch does blow up the water tank that's underneath the arena, effectively drowning the brain. And they feel success for a moment. They revel. There's a lot of revelation in this success. They did it, right? Like this final act, this thing that they got to do, it happened. But before he can really engage with this success for too long, Haymitch recognizes that Ampert is being actively slaughtered by mutts at that moment. They were programmed for Ampert and for Ampert alone, and BT, his one request of Haymitch outside of blowing up the arena and participating in this rebel plot, if possible, try to spare Ampert from suffering, and that is not what happens. Haymitch tries, he claws his way through these tiny golden squirrels, and by the time he reaches Ampert and the squirrels are called off, he's just a pile of small white bones. Our poor protagonist feels like he is failing every single step of the way. He feels like it was his job to protect Luella, and she died in the chariot race. He feels like it was his job to protect Lulu, and she died. He feels like it was his job to protect the newcomers, and a lot of them have been slaughtered, and now Ampert has died, and he was unable to save him. It would have been impossible to save Ampert from these mutts. What happens with Katniss and Rue echoes this as well, because Katniss also loses her young ally immediately after a successful explosion. And before Haymitch has too much time to think about it, the mountain in the far corner of the arena explodes. Turns out it's a volcano. Haymitch is able to hide inside of his shirt while the volcano wipes out what is probably an enormous amount of tributes on that mountain, because Haymitch knows from Ampert that most of the tributes went toward the mountain, career and newcomer alike. So while the mountain is exploding, Haymitch is waiting to die, and he is just drowning in shame. He thinks, I've got nothing but a big mouth, an inflated sense of self-importance. Why did I think I could affect any change? And I think what Suzanne Collins is saying to us here, I think this is the most important piece of the book, is that no one achieves anything that they don't think they can. No one is special. No one is superior. No one is the right person for the job. It's really more a matter of, what are you willing to risk? What is it going to take? Because it might take everything. So while Haymitch is feeling particularly down on himself and doing a lot of self-flagellation, he thinks, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Because the volcano has gone off, even though they were effective in drowning the brain of the arena seems to have some sort of backup generator that keeps the whole thing going. So their plot feels very much like it was sort of in vain. So he says, what would BT do? He would find the generator and he'd take out the generator. This leads Haymitch to his trek north. And this is the only part of his games that really gets portrayed in certainly the recaps, but maybe even to the nation. It's just him going north and north and north. And he gets lost inside the maze and he's on the outskirts of the arena and he gets really scared and he ends up following a bunny back into the arena. And as he re-enters the arena, he is immediately attacked by two careers. Haymitch ends up killing two career tributes, acting in self-defense and acting on desperation instinct because they were going to murder him. But he recognizes this as him killing two someones brutally. This is when Maisie re-enters the picture. She has a dart gun and she dips the dart in the poison supplied readily by the arena, and she shoots darts at people. And actually, Haymitch is about to be murdered by Panache, but starts talking to Panache about how it might look stupid to murder Haymitch in this way. He's sort of manipulating Panache, and he recognizes that the person he has to thank for his ability to talk himself out of this or ramble desperately while someone's about to murder him is Caesar Flickerman. The reason that Panache hesitates is because Caesar has told him he's stupid, and he's worried that he's going to look dumb. Because Haymitch is able to buy himself time, Maisie ends up saving his life. Maisie and Haymitch team up. It's clear to Maisie that Haymitch has some sort of plan that he's not letting her in on. She wants to go back to the cornucopia to get food. She's not as familiar with hunger and starvation as he is. He has shared his resources with her as well. He started receiving sponsor gifts, and on their first night, he asks Maisie if she would be his sister, and she says yes. Haymitch really wants to get through the hedge maze, thinks that the generator is past the hedge maze, and they have this idea about their posters, right? Like they don't want to participate in the games in the way that they are supposed to. While they're working together, while they're walking, Maisie ends up asking Haymitch if he ever wanted a real sister, and he said that he actually did. We learned that his mom gave birth to twins. They were born stillborn. This prompts him to start talking about trauma. We get this quote about the fallout of the games, spreading out like ripples in a pond when you toss in a rock, concentric circles of damage, washing over the dead tributes' families, their friends, their neighbors, to the ends of the district. Losing your child in this horribly graphic way is going to impact you, and it's going to impact the next generation. It's going to impact the siblings of that family. It's going to impact the community of that family, right? Like we recognize that Haymitch being plucked from his community has left the community with an enormous hole in it. And even Haymitch being returned to the community does not mean that he gets to re-enter the community. It's about the impact of trauma and the way that it can be tangibly and intangibly measured. So it's not just these kids that die in the arena. It's not just the propaganda of it all. It's not just the peacekeepers enforcing the police state and totalitarian rule, right? It's the trauma of it all and the way that trauma is crippling. And without proper help or the effective tools or resources, even with them, families don't recover from this. Maisie and Haymitch respond to this call. There's this porcupine that seems to be crossed with a bear. So it's an enormous porcupine. The sound it makes is like a baby in distress. It's wailing like a baby in distress. And this implies that the Capitol sent this out specifically to target newcomers because they don't want the newcomer alliance to have any weight and they don't want this trend to catch on. We know this because the newcomers are the only people that would respond to a distress call, right? The careers wouldn't be responding to a distress call. Only someone who wants to help would encounter it. And obviously, it's more proof that the games were rigged. Like, we lose 3 newcomers to the stupid porcupine bear thing. Also, something that has gone on is that Haymitch and Maisie have tried to slice through the hedge maze that Haymitch believes the generator is behind, and there's a bunch of ladybugs on the hedge maze. Haymitch doesn't believe that ladybugs will hurt them because he's familiar with ladybugs because Lenore Dove has taught him about them. When they do attempt to slice through the hedge maze, all the ladybugs swarm them and stick to them and start to absorb their blood and like swell to different sizes, and they have to like dig them out like ticks. They have to pluck them one by one. Oh my God, it's horrifying. And Maisie's like, I thought you said they weren't going to do anything to us. And Haymitch says, I'm sorry, nothing behaves naturally here, which is another really good counterpoint, right, to everything that Snow and Dr. Gall spent 400 pages of book trying to convince us of in Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, right? This is not the natural state of man. Nothing in here is natural. The entire time that they've been engaged in the horror show that is the Hunger Games, since they are initially abducted, Maisley has insisted on eating everything with a knife and fork, even sandwiches. There's a lot of maybe mental health implications or OCD implications about this. But for the first time, Haymitch considers that maybe this is a part of her poster, right? Like maybe this is her saying, we are not primitive, brutal people. We are civilized. And we appreciate beautiful things. We are as good as you. Haymitch and Maisley end up coming across two game makers, two very young game makers in their signature white outfits. You know who else is also there is Silka and a tribute from District 4. When they come across the game makers, who seem to be very young, right, are obviously doing grunt work and dangerous work, the game makers try to gaslight them and say that you're in violation of the rules and you're going to be punished if you don't walk away. That's kind of a smart way to defend yourself. Immediately, Mariette throws her trident and kills one of these game makers, and Maisley kills the other one. There is remote game maker intervention that forces Mariette, Silka, Maisley, and Haymitch to clear the area. The tributes from District 1 and the tributes from District 12 don't end up having the interaction or the fight that they would have had. And Maisley's pretty fucking pissed. She's like, where the hell were you? Why am I relying on Mariette, right? Like, why is she the one taking out another game maker? What is going on? Why didn't you kill anyone? And Haymitch is like, well, I can't even say that I've never killed before because I have. He comes up with a list of excuses or justifications in his mind. I think it's shock. Of course, it's systemic oppression. I do not blame Haymitch for this. She says, maybe you should be the victor, Haymitch. It'll give you time to grow a backbone. And the victors of the Hunger Games get a lot of shit. I don't know. Is it entirely warranted? Like, is that fair? I guess the point is, right, like to win the games, you must have compromised yourself and your values, and you have probably killed your fellow district citizen, and thus you are now more capital than you are district. It's very complicated. And she asks, like, did you not kill them because of your poster? Like, what happened here? And Haymitch is like, no, just programmed to be spineless, I guess. Just implicitly submissive. And he feels some of the shame and humiliation that comes up when we are, as humans, oppressed. There's this interaction that I really want to mention that we don't totally understand yet as readers. Okay, so Maisley is telling Haymitch about her grandmother, who Haymitch says used to give him free candy. And Maisley's like, yeah, she used to get in trouble for that. And then Maisley shows Haymitch a picture of her grandma, knowing that Suzanne Collins doesn't waste anything. This has to mean something. What it means, we can't know exactly. Maybe it has something to do with Lucy Gray. I don't know. We don't know who Maisley's grandma is, but we know she was nice, and we know she said this. It's okay, Maisley. Nothing they can take from you was ever worth keeping. That's not sentiment, that's lyrics, right? So how does she know those lyrics? Does she know those lyrics because she was around during the Hunger Games when Lucy Gray sang nothing you can take from me was ever worth keeping? Or is it because she wrote those lyrics? Does it mean that Maisley's grandma is Covey? We don't know. We really don't know. I had to take my sweater off. I got hot. There's a lot to communicate. So Haymitch convinces Maisley, against her better judgment or her instincts, to continue moving north and continue moving into the hedge. And they finally do get past the hedge, and Haymitch is able to realize that because they're on a barren stretch of ground, this is not the arena, and this is where he wants to die. He's like, nope, I'm not going nowhere else. If I'm going to be murdered, I'm going to be murdered in real life, not in the arena. Maisley ends up walking away to gather more resources, not because they've just broken off their alliance. We come to find out that the way that the Capitol has spun this is very different than what actually happened. She ends up walking away and is pretty immediately killed by candy pink birds. That's not accidental writing either. Haymitch recognizes this as a very personal punishment, have been programmed to target Maisley in the same way that the squirrels were programmed to target Ampert. And the use of the word candy pink really hits home for Maisley Donner, who did not want to spend her life behind a candy counter. She's killed pretty immediately, and she goes the way she wants to go. What Maisley asked Mags for was to not go begging. And she doesn't. Haymitch is really distraught. He's lost someone that he considers a sister, and Haymitch recognizes that she would have been a much better victor than him, right? She's quick-witted, she's smart, she'd find a way to spin certain things, and he's like, instead of me, if I even had a chance of winning, goodbye, Maisley Donner, who I loathed, then grudgingly respected, then loved. A sister is someone you fight with and fight for, tooth and nail. After the loss of Maisley, Haymitch locates Welly, the only surviving newcomer. Now it's just down to the three of them, Silka from District 1, Haymitch from District 12, and Welly from District 9. She has been hiding in a tree for an entire week, very much victimized by the Capitol's weapon of choice, starvation. It's implied that she was in that tree for 6 to 7 days, and the mentors, when Haymitch finds her, sends them chocolate, and they eat it together. And a huge storm goes on over their heads that night in the arena, and it actually washes away all evidence of the volcano, which I should say that the volcano, when it erupted, it was a chemical explosion, not necessarily a lava explosion, and the clothing that the tributes were wearing protected them from the chemical burn, thus ensuring their deaths were really fucking slow. And everything that the chemical covered in the arena turned into sort of a rock candy looking thing, but that rainstorm dissolves all the rock candy stuff. So by the time the rainstorm ends, the arena looks good as new. During that rainstorm, Silka actually happens to find her way under the tree that Haymitch and Welly are in, unbeknownst to her, and Haymitch hears her crying, so he drops her some chocolate. And he recognizes this as the most obvious form of district unity or alliance that has taken place since the Dark Days. It's a really big deal. Also, while he's waiting out this rainstorm, Haymitch has Maisie's token on his neck. He recognizes that the necklace for her token is leaving a black residue on his fingers, and thus he remembers what BT was telling him before they were interrupted, and that is that they've also replaced, must have been, Maisie's token. So now, with the sunflower and this new fuse, he has all the makings for a new bomb. So he's really excited about his new purpose and his new plan. He's gonna get Maisie down from the tree, he's going to feed her, and he's gonna make sure that she is the last surviving member. He's gonna make sure that she's the victor of this year's games. And what he's gonna do is he's gonna lure Silka to the cornucopia, and he's gonna blow them both up. Haymitch hides Welly in a bush, and she begs him not to go. When he's on his way back to Welly, he sees a sponsor gift drop in front of him, and he can guarantee that he is on camera. And that sponsor gift is a pitcher of milk. It's the same pitcher as the pitcher of milk that he drank when President Snow asked for milk. So Haymitch is faced with the most horrifying decision that this series, this universe, has ever presented us with. He either has to bring the milk to Welly and poison her. If he doesn't bring the milk to Welly, he will look like a district traitor, right? It doesn't make any sense for him not to bring that milk to Welly. It's clearly not a gift from Wyrus or Mags. This is a gift from President Snow. If he drinks the milk, he will die, effectively saving Welly from a poisoned end, but he'll also look like a district traitor. This is Snow saying, you don't control your fucking narrative, I do. Either way, you lose. Also, right, another echo of Katniss with the poisonous berries, a capital-provided weapon where she might have to kill herself in order to maintain control of her narrative, in order to say that I am not your plaything and I am not yours to manipulate. And Haymitch tells us that every cell in his body is resisting from capitulating to this end, which proves to us that he is not implicitly submissive, because no one is. Haymitch hears commotion while he is contemplating this, while he's about to drink this milk, and he runs toward it. When he gets there, he finds that Silka has beheaded Welly. It's very hard to read. It becomes very graphic. I'll let you read it yourself. I'm just going to overview it. Silka and Haymitch engage in a battle to the death, and Haymitch says he can feel those 31 allies at his back every step of the way. During this battle, Haymitch is bringing them further and further up to that space of the arena that is no longer arena, because this is where he wants to die, on real soil, not in the fake delusion capital land. He has an axe, she has a sword. They both sustain really brutal injuries that will be fatal just in due time. So Silka is trying to outlast Haymitch, and Haymitch is insisting that these games will have no victor. Silka, after deciding that she can probably outlast Haymitch, throws his axe into what we know is a force field. And he watches, breathless, for what the love of his life would call poetic justice, as the axe comes back and sinks itself into Silka's head. Haymitch is officially the sole survivor of the Quarter Quell. He decides that he has no intention of surviving this. He takes a sunflower bomb, he lights the fuse, and he throws it into the generator, and he's effectively ready to die. In fact, he tells us that he dies happy. And he does, he will, but not today, and not without a lot more suffering to come. Haymitch wakes up in a lab that is very reminiscent of Dr. Gall's lab. He's on a cold metal table, and there are Avoxes to one side of him, and they are like pleading and throwing themselves against the glass. And on the other side is the bunny that he believes he hung out with in the arena, and he watches a snake eat the bunny. After that, he's brought back to the apartment that he shared with his fellow tributes, and he's left there alone for a week, subsisting on a diet of bread and milk. He wonders about his prep team, he wonders about Mags and Wyrus, he wonders who is being punished right now for the fact that he survived his games, because he knows that somebody will be, and he's very, very worried about his family. He's kept inside this room, and he has no control of the TV, which just is routinely playing very loud and particularly brutal recaps from previous Hunger Games. And then at night, it actually plays Lucy Gray's tribute interview when she sings. This is how Haymitch realizes that what Lenore Dove is wearing on her person in her hair are scraps of Lucy Gray's dress, and it connects certain dots for him as it relates to President Snow. He even wonders if Snow is responsible for Lucy Gray's death, and he thinks that can't be possible. He would just be a child. And it's like, yeah, no, turns out he's always been that way. He's kept in that apartment for so long that he eventually finds himself like throwing furniture at the barred windows. And this is when his prep team and Effie walk in, and he feels he has fully devolved into the animal that they believed him to be. They prepare him for his victory celebration, which is something that all victors of the Hunger Games are subjected to, wherein he's forced to watch a recap of his games in front of him and see how the story has been spun. There's basically no mention of his alliance. There's really no mention of him helping Lulu. There's no footage of him helping Ampert, and it spins him and Maisley's relationship to look a lot more surface level than it actually was. And what he's so frustrated by is that the people of the Capitol don't seem to practice any discernment as it relates to this imagery that they're being shown. He's saying that their willingness to accept this, to buy this, to swallow this, validates it as truth, even though everybody knows it's not. We also find out that Mags has been tortured to the point where she is now in a wheelchair, presumably because Haymitch survived, and Wyrus, who before the games was certainly odd, now seems to be unable to communicate or articulate herself. She is more the person that Katniss will know in the Third Quarter Quell. After that, there's an after party where Haymitch is forced to sit inside of a golden cage. The imagery here is very telling. Citizens of the Capitol come up to him and they feed him food through the bars, and he smiles at them and he takes pictures with them, and he articulates to us that this is a shame and a mortification that a person just simply does not live down. He's doing anything he can at this point in time to simper to the Capitol because he's very, very afraid that his family and the love of his life are being tortured or hurt or killed right now because he has survived. For the next 10 days, he's carted around the Capitol and forced to attend parties like this. 10 days is so many fucking days. We have no idea how long he was in the lab after the games. We know he was forced into solitary confinement for what he estimates to be a week, and then we have this 10-day long parade. So it's safe to assume that after the games ends, there are several weeks, if not a month, that goes by before he is returned home. And the train that he's returned home on is the same train that he arrived on. And the train is not pulling out. Once he's loaded, he's like, hey, what are we waiting for? And a peacekeeper says, we're waiting for your friends. And he's not really sure what to do with that information until they load into the compartment next to his the corpses of Wyatt, Maisley, and Lulu. It can't be known. Haymitch says that it's just an apt that they finish this together, and then he sort of moves back on his earlier vindication that nothing the Capitol can take from him was ever worth keeping, because he recognizes that you can take Ma and you can take Sid and you can take Lenore Dove and they are worth keeping, right? Collins is always engaging us with the both and I think the truth is in life, things are very rarely absolute. It's usually both to some capacity. And that's what she's grappling with in this book. And she walks a gorgeous line. When Haymitch arrives home, he walks through town. He's not greeted by his family at the platform, right? Like, it's still very different, still worse in a lot of ways than what Katniss experiences. And we also know that Haymitch does this train ride every single year for the rest of his life by himself, right? He would take it with tributes every year as a mentor, and then take it home by himself every single year with the bodies of all the dead tributes every single year. The pain of that is unfathomable. So he's walking through town. He's still in his victory tour celebration clothes. And as he gets to his neighborhood, he recognizes that one of the houses is on fire and he knows that it's his. His mother and Sid have been burned alive. Burdock tells him that they tried to stop the flames, but the cistern was empty. Haymitch is like, the cistern is empty because of me. He ends up sleeping at the McCoys that night. He attends the funerals of Ma, Sid, Wyatt, Maisley, and Luella, and also one Jethro Callow, who commits suicide when his boy's body is returned to him and somebody spits on his grave. Actually, at that funeral, his eyes sweep across the crowd and he lays eyes on Marilee Donner, but he thinks it's Maisley, and so he runs to greet her. This causes them both to sort of break down for a second because he's like, Maisley, and she's lost her twin and he's lost a sister. So Haymitch is taken back to his home in Victor's Village by Burdock and Blair. He recognizes this new home in Victor's Village as a capital cage. It's disgusting to him, and it's empty and it's hollow and it has AC, and that's not normal. He hasn't been able to see Lenore Dove because she has been held captive by the peacekeepers the whole time since she was on the phone with Haymitch. When she is released, Haymitch ends up watching her for a second and reveling in the beauty of her. She's outside with her geese. She can't stand for any wild thing to be caged, which of course she is, and Haymitch is, and maybe we all are. We are all wild things. He sort of runs in a field. They greet each other. They have this heartwarming moment, and she picks up a bag of candy. And remember, Haymitch bought a bag of candy for her the morning of the reaping that he planned to give to her, and he actually told Sid to give to her, and Sid did. Haymitch thinks that this is that same bag of candy, and so Haymitch plucks one of the candies out of the packaging and he puts it in her mouth. And that's when Lenore Dove says, more candy, right? Like 2 candies. Sid gave me the other pack. And Haymitch recognizes that this candy must be poison and is obviously a gift from President Snow. And Haymitch has just put it in her mouth himself. And Lenore Dove is poisoned. She dies. Her dying words are, don't you let the sun rise on the reaping. And we know that Haymitch will do that because actually Haymitch is going to be the last tribute reaped ever from District 12. Because the truth is, this is not the end of Haymitch's story. This is actually the beginning of Haymitch's story. And sometimes, when things look most bleak, it feels like the end. Usually it does. It feels like the end. But it's not. There's lots more story to come. Haymitch ends up fully isolated from everyone he loves because he understands that anyone he loves is going to be targeted by President Snow. The last 2 people to abandon him are Burdock Everdeen and Astrid March, and he has to resort to throwing rocks at them to get them to abandon him. And he throws a rock and it hits Astrid March in the head, and that's sort of the last straw. He tells us that he would welcome death if it wasn't for his promise to Lenore Dove that he would somehow keep the sun from rising on the reaping. And he does. He really does. He ends up banging on Clark Carmine and Tan Amber's door in a fit of grief, saying, where is she? Because he wants to know where she's buried, and he ends up finding her grave, and it's out in the woods, and it's next to Maude Ivory's and Lucy Gray's. He buries the flint striker with her, and it's the last remnant of the life he had before he entered the games. And he tells us that he ends up hitting the bottle, and then hitting the bottle even harder. It's hard not to believe, knowing what we know about Haymitch and what he thinks of alcohol, that this is not a punitive behavior. I think it is. I think he's punishing himself. Haymitch actually ends up stumbling upon Lenore Dove's sort of last message. It's graffitied in an alley, and it says, no capital, no hanging tree. No capital, no reaping. It's actually Maisley that clues Haymitch into the fact that this is Lenore Dove's doing because Maisley saw her with orange paint on her fingernails, and these messages are painted in orange. Haymitch recognizes that he, as a survivor, has a responsibility to carry on. During his victory tour, he's on a new train, lots of steel and chrome, and Plutarch takes him in District 11 up to that attic that Peeta, Haymitch, and Katniss will eventually stand in, and tells him that he is not a failure. And just because they have not achieved success today does not mean that they never will. And Haymitch says, you need someone who's not like me. And Plutarch says, no, we need someone exactly like you, just luckier. Haymitch says, you were capable of imagining a different future, and that's what really mattered. I won't get into the depth of the epilogue until the end of Mockingjay, but something that's said here is that Haymitch watches Katniss Everdeen grow up, and she reminds him immediately of Luella McCoy. I first saw the girl at the Hob when she was just a baby, tough and smart, her hair in 2 braids then, reminding me for all the world of Luella McCoy, my sweetheart of old. And he says he tried not to let Katniss impede it into his heart, but the walls of someone's heart are not impregnable, not if they've ever known love. At one point in time, at the end, after this entire revolution has taken place and we do arrive at a happy ending, this is not the end, even though it's the worst. He says about Katniss that she's not an easy person, like him. And I want you to take something very important from that. The message here is clear. Women and people alike have been taught that being easy is a compliment. When you've been entrenched in an education system that looks more like a banking system, where freedom of thought is not encouraged and regurgitation is, you are taught that you are meant to be easy. But the point here, Miss Suzanne Collins' point here, is that the change makers never are. If you want to be like Katniss, which I know I do, smart, resourceful, compassionate, kind, you won't be easy either. We will dive in to the nuance and brilliance and pain and tragedy in her story next time. My name is Sage. Thanks for watching.